now we're actually recording a bit, so we might as well just continue our conversation here. This is a Pitboss review number 3. I have my friend
Jose Pino.
I wasn't sure if he wanted to use his real name because I'm Pat Pitboss on this. So Pat and Pino are here today, and we're going to save the world. All right. So you were talking about difficult conversations, having a conversation about difficult conversations.
Yeah. And I was just kind of spitballing in my head about the importance of being able to have difficult conversations these days, where it seems like too many people are not interested in the actual conversation and are just interested in either debating or arguing or just like scoring points in some like weird, especially online, some weird kind of game where they just automatically separate themselves into sides. And it's almost like a game of dodgeball. It's like, okay, if you grab the ball on this side, then that means you're on the opposite team. So as soon as you say something that puts you in contention to whatever they think you are, then they just automatically decide
that you've been pigeonholed as one
like,
of them.
Oh, okay, so you're on that side. Okay, so you go, and I'm going to throw this, and it's like immediately, and then kind of correlating with that is the importance also of acknowledging that just because someone has a thought or an opinion, that doesn't mean that they are that thought or opinion.
Well, I consider myself a centrist. Like politically, I hope this volume's okay, whatever. Politically, socially, I consider myself a centrist. And what I see happening in the political spectrum is the left, and the right, to be honest, but like the left is running, and they're going to a ridiculous length. And me being a centrist, I'm continually, the goalposts are shifting, and it's pushing me into the right because that center, you basically have to be a leftist to be a centrist. Like when, let's say 10 years ago, when what I would consider a pretty extreme leftist is now center.
Right.
You know what I mean? Not a moderate left, like social programs and stuff, but like you have to be, everybody's got a right to do whatever the fuck they want. Like almost like crazy libertarianism is now the standard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And realistically, what I see on the right is because they're running too, but not as fast. And what I see on the right is a more and more open acceptance of like straight up white supremacy.
Yeah.
Like Nazism and fascism. Like these are becoming mainstream viewpoints when, again, 10 years, 15 years ago, that was still a very radical, keep it in the closet kind of idea. You didn't see people talking about this except on like the real fringes of society, right?
Yeah.
And as that extremism grows, I think, what do they call it? Liberal rules of conversation, where you assume the other person is speaking in good faith and you're trying to establish the truth of an issue. I see those ideas getting thrown out.
Right.
And people are eager to see the other as the opponent.
Yeah, and that was kind of, that's interesting. Liberal, what was it? Liberal ideas of conversation?
Yeah, I think it's a small L. Liberal.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Liberal goals of conversation, or the liberal rules of conversation, where the goal, or you assume everybody's coming in with good faith.
Yeah.
Like, and somebody could say the wrong word, and it's okay to make a mistake because you're trying to get the point across. It's the spirit of the conversation versus the letter of the conversation.
Yeah, because my thought on it was just be more charitable. So, when somebody says something that
that's a good word
that
for
you
it.
might like clash with or whatever, be more charitable and don't automatically assume that they're coming with bad intentions.
Yeah, that their intentions are the worst, or they're automatically a bigot, or they're automatically, a communist.
Yeah. And so then, you can just be more charitable and ask, okay, so just to clarify, what did you mean when you said, whatever? Or, okay, so this is what I'm hearing, but I'm not sure if that's what you meant to say. So can you expand on that idea?
Okay, so that being said, though, these conversations and this increasing division that we see between people and hostility also is happening on the internet.
Yes, very much so.
Where we can't have those nuanced conversations or long-winded. Can you elaborate? How can you elaborate in a Twitter feed? How can you elaborate on a Facebook conversation when you don't really have the time, the room, the space to do it? What you and I could cover in, let's say, 10 minutes, right, is a lot different or a lot more than probably 3 days worth of bickering on the internet.
Yeah.
You know, and we would respect each other a lot more looking each other in the eye and having a civil conversation than we would with like, ha ha ha, what are you condescending me? Fuck you then, you commie. You know? So yeah, that's I think a very valid reflection where the internet isn't the best.
No, it's almost geared to the opposite, to not being able to have those conversations. But I think that's why it's important for people to be mindful of that so that you can. I generally try, sometimes when you're on social media, it's very easy just to go for the instant gratification of
low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, just score that quick point, get a quick laugh, make that quick little dig.
That's just it. People like jabs.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And it makes them feel better. I got in a debate recently because my band Standard Bearer, we have a song called I Believe in Hierarchy, right? And it's a play.
Yeah, I think you posted the lyrics, right?
Yes,
yeah, I read through it and it was good.
Well, okay, so this is the thing. And it's a play on an old exploited song, which is I Believe in Anarchy.
Okay.
And I was listening to that, I'm like, come on, man. Like, the principle of anarchy where everybody lives together in harmony and there's no exploitation and everybody's an autonomous little individual living, cohabitating with all these other autonomous little individuals. It works great in theory and in practice until somebody becomes a dickhead.
Yeah.
Somebody wants to be a bully or a thief, or let's say there's a limited amount of resources and two people need more than that limited amount. So one person wants the resource and the other person wants the resource. Then you have to have some sort of mediation. Either both, let's say it's something that can't be divided up, right? A partner or I don't know, one item of food, right? And it can't really be divided up. Sooner or later, dominance makes its way in. And if you can't handle that on your own, then you're going to need to delegate a specific section of society to decide that.
Yeah, that's always been my problem with libertarianism, because it just seems to me like the end result is feudalism.
Yeah.
At some point, it's just going to happen. It's going to have to happen that people will band together, form a group, and then somebody's going to form a bigger group with stronger people, and it's
an inevitability.
It seems to me.
Yeah.
It seems to me like it is.
So to maintain civilized society, there's two angles. You either believe in might makes right, where the bigger, stronger, more dominant person has the right to the things that the weaker people can't have, which is kind of a scary world, right? But that's kind of what anarchy would lead to. Or you believe in social order. And to maintain social order, you have to delegate a section of that society to stand between violence, exploitation, and chaos, and the order that everybody chooses to adhere to.
Right.
So when I hear these things like all cops are bastards, right?
Yeah.
Right? And I got in a big debate on that post, and it ended up getting deleted with this guy. He's like, all cops are bastards. They're all tools of the ruling elite. I'm like, wow. I remember saying that when I was 15.
Yeah.
30 years ago. Maybe you'll follow the logical conclusion to this, because some cops are bastards. I'm willing to say that. And I'm willing to say that probably as a result of trauma and things that they witness on the job.
Yeah.
They become jaded and they automatically assume the person they're interacting with is a monster by default and treat them like a monster without giving them the benefit of the doubt. But that's a result of their own trauma.
Right.
And
yeah, I know that I would not have the mental capacity to do that job.
No, I couldn't do social work. I couldn't do
No.
policing. I couldn't do a lot of stuff where I had to look directly into the eyes of the most reprehensible part of society.
Yeah.
What I've heard the same about Facebook censors, the guys that
Oh,
are
yeah.
and they're the ones that say what it has to be taken off of Facebook, and their turnover and their mental health issues are astronomical. Because can you imagine if your job is to watch child porn and snuff and God knows what all day and say you can't do it? And I've heard it's the same with the internet child exploitation units, where they have mandatory maximums you can serve on that. Because when you go to court, you need to be very aware of all the content on that guy's computer.
Right.
You have to have gone through it and watched what was on there. And I don't, even thinking about it puts my stomach in my throat, right?
And then you become the taxi driver.
Right? And that's just it. And so you're that cop that just hits first and asks questions later.
Yeah.
So I think we both agree on this, where Society would do better if we invested in infrastructure, especially in the areas of health.
Yes,
And
mental health.
I think mental health is, or psychological wellness is huge
Yeah.
for everybody.
For everybody.
Yeah, it's unattainable though. It's unaffordable. It's there aren't enough staff in order to treat all the people that really need therapy.
Right now, yeah, we would need definitely a major overhaul of our healthcare system. But I know for sure that Argentina rolled it into their their healthcare program, where I can't remember what I think it's like you get one free visit a month, everybody.
I don't think that's enough, but whatever.
No. But
yeah, okay.
it's something, yeah, and it's helped a ton down there.
Well, how couldn't it?
Yeah,
Like, okay.
I think it should be part of our healthcare personally.
Well, I don't know why it isn't.
Yeah.
Anybody who's grown up with being traumatized growing up has toxic coping mechanisms. Well, often has toxic coping mechanisms as a result of that. Now, these toxic coping mechanisms can find their way into violence, addiction, hypersexuality, all kinds of like toxicity.
Yeah.
And if we can treat that, we can actually, or recognize that, we can develop a better lifestyle, an overcoming of our old ways of being into a better way of being. And I think cops get traumatized, and that's when they become bastards.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that they call quote unquote criminals are a result of trauma, whether in their house or intergenerational trauma or just societal trauma. But we aren't treating it. And what I see is that an increasing, and it's not getting any better, an increasing medication or of that, like here's your drugs, here's your pharmaceuticals, here's your alcohol, here's your tobacco, here's your hypersexuality, here's your screen.
Yeah.
And these things distract you from the pain, but they don't heal the pain. And these things also make a very small group of people money.
Right. Yeah.
They're
So the
profiting.
incentive to continue it is there.
Yeah, there's no incentive to stop it.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, there probably is incentive not to stop it in the form of lobbying and all of those systems that get put in place. And
Definitely in the United States, where the prison industrial complex is a thing.
well, that's a whole other a whole other ball game where it's better to keep people in jail.
Yeah.
Let alone keeping people addicted.
Right.
See, I wanted to get into addictions counseling as an occupation other than tattooing. Just for those people that don't know, both Jose and I are tattooers. And we're both very politically and socially interested. But instead of tattooing, I've kind of said that I've treated, or I mark vain people for money. I'm not really doing any really, I hurt vain people for money, yes, and give them a memento to go home with. But I'm not really doing that noble work. And I could be doing noble work if I got into addictions counseling. And actually doing the podcast was part of it. It was like, I'm not even going to lie, it was a propaganda coup or it was an attempt at a propaganda from the get-go to advocate for certain lifestyle stuff. But I think that I would like to help. But how does the average person help a community? And there's some schools of thought that say you need to help yourself first.
Yeah.
And once you've worked through your own shit, then you might be able to start helping other people get to the point where you are. But like you're always kind of going to be a wounded healer.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I kind of, in my opinion, I think to be an effective healer, I think you need to be coming from a place of having healed your own wounds first, because otherwise you might be a little detached from what you're trying to heal.
Yeah, I've never trusted an addictions counselor that's never gurned or
yeah.
dug for those last shards of meth on their carpet. Like, you don't really know my struggle, do you? You
might have read about it, but
and that's just it. And I see a real disconnect, and this goes for politics too, and not just like counseling, but politics too, where people want to advocate for people they don't understand.
Yeah.
They want to say, oh, I'm here to help you, but I really don't want to go to your neighborhood or have a face-to-face conversation with you. I can't laugh at your jokes, and I don't like the fact that you use profanity. Like, fuck, you're obviously not like me, right? I remember when the NDP ladies came to my front door and they're asking what needs to happen in order to get me to vote for NDP. And I'm talking like a blue-collar guy. I'm like, what are you going to do to stop my truck from getting broken into? What are you going to do to respect the middle class, the working class? Because what I see NDP being is an upper class talking about how to save those lower class people,
Right.
but they neglect everybody in between. Where are you getting your money from? Well, you're going to take it from the people between, give it to the people lower, but you're still going to be on that upper echelon, and you really don't want to sacrifice that. You don't want them in your house. You don't want them in your neighborhood. And I laugh at that. And she just looked at me like, oh, really? And I'm like, yeah, I know you're a dentist's wife. You know, you're like a social worker kind of person. You're not really in touch with the working class anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know when that change took place, where the left side of the political spectrum became this kind of university educated, where they
Bougie intellectual.
yeah they formed that separation of used to be, you know, unionized, like that kind of
Blue
that
collar
was
working
one
class.
of the biggest parts of being left winger was, you know, forming unions, taking care of your community, taking care of the working class. And then and obviously you do need those people that have the education, but it just seemed that they focused directly on that, and then it was like, oh no, this is all you need, and, you know, never mind all that other stuff we were doing before.
Like authentic leftism back in the day was by the people for the people, you
Yes.
know, and now I don't see the people being represented.
No.
Anybody running for politician is power hungry. They're trying to do it as an occupation. They're trying to.
Yeah.
I don't think they have the best interests of the common man in mind.
No,
And I think
yeah.
the right sees that. And this is the problem, where I see a lot of commonality between like the emerging left and right. I do, and I know it's not popular to say, but the right are generally working class dudes that want to have a safe neighborhood, feed their family, have a roof over their head, and anything that threatens that is the enemy.
Right.
Whether it's criminals or the taxation or being taxed without representation.
Yep.
And unfortunately, some hateful individuals feed them the wrong information.
Yeah, and that's, you need to regain or take control back of the narrative of, you know, getting that message across that, yes, these are all real problems, but they're telling you the wrong solution. We need to focus on the right solution. And in my opinion, the right feeds those people the wrong solution to continue to stay in power and to feed their program, while the left just shuts them out and calls them bigots and, you know, cancels any chance of them bridging that gap.
And at the same time, I think that the emerging left, especially with identity politics and you know, the new narratives, they don't care about class. They don't care about economics. It's all about identity, whether gender or national or ethnic or religious identity, and they don't care. Well, because they don't work for a living.
Right.
You know, I hate to say it, like you're a university educated person and you're working as a barista.
Yeah.
And you've got all the solutions because you went to university, you know, and you still can't pay your bills. You got your PhD and you're getting a $20 hour a job. Like, and then the guy who's like, I don't know, a working class high school guy who gets a construction job out of high school, who's getting taxed 40% of his income because he's making a decent amount of money. And where's it going? Well, you got these university, you know, professional theorists telling it you need to give it to a social infrastructure benefiting people that are robbing his truck. Like that solution isn't there because these people are out of touch with reality. I think in a lot of ways, the right tend to be rooted in reality and they see the shitty side of it, right? The left tend to be rooted in idealism and they don't see the reality of the situation because they aren't being taxed the same. A lot of the left are on social disabilities. You know, like most of the communists I've met aren't working class guys. They're on welfare or they're on social infrastructure stuff like permanent disability.
Right.
And they're like, that's the way, man. I'm getting people to vote for NDP and, you know, you need to go further left. I'm like, what do you do for a living? I'm disabled. What? You're drinking Starbucks. You're having these lofty conversations. You could easily have a job, but you just don't want one. And that's, I think, where because technically I used to be centrist. I'm right leaning now.
Yeah.
You used to be centrist and you're left leaning now. You're a commie. Commie.
I can't remember who. I know it was a punk song, but I think it might have been in Spanish now that I'm like actually. But the chorus or whatever was it's a left leaning punk band, and they were making fun of those type of leftists. And one of the lines in it was about the coffee cafe communists.
Cafe
and it was
that's
basically
good. I like that.
The guy that doesn't have to work for a living, that just sits around with his beret, and sipping coffee, reading manifestos, and talking about lofty goals and ideas. But
see, that's me, but I'm on the right. That's me. I talk a lot about the working class because I'm now own the shop and I'm semi-retired and I have time to read and to. But I had this conversation with a friend of ours yesterday, and I pointed out that I'm like a critical ally. But people don't like critical allies.
Right.
And
that was actually my second point in the having difficult conversations is people need to think more critically and be charitable. Those are the two.
I think people need to accept criticism without being injured.
Mm-hmm.
You can be offended, and that isn't an injury. One of my senseis one time, he tore a strip off me so hard that, like, to be honest, and I'd like to think I'm pretty resilient, somebody who was a little more fragile than me would have never gone back and cried their way into a lighter area or a lighter work. He's like, fuck, you're dangerous. You need to check this. You don't do this anymore. And I'm like, ugh, really, I'm that bad? I suck that bad? And I cried that night, and I went back in the morning and I adjusted what he told me. And he's like, where's the guy that was here yesterday? You're not the same guy that was here yesterday. You're better today.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I took what you told me and I put it to use. Now, was I attacked or was I checked?
I mean, it depends how you want to look at it, both.
See,
but you need to separate that, right? It's kind of separate the ego, which I think too many people have a hard time doing. Because did he say those things to direct it at you personally? Yes. If you wanted to focus on that, you would have drowned in that negativity and never come up from it, never learned from it. But if you can say, okay, yeah, he was saying you are this, you are that, you did this. Okay, but what was the message? These things are things that you need to correct. Okay, I can work on that.
Well,
were my feelings hurt? Yes.
Yes, of
How
course.
important is it in the
Is that a
growth
real
process?
injury?
Yeah. It's like, I mean,
if I
even
go into the gym and I can't lift next to anything next to the guy next to me, am I going to quit because I'm a weakling, or am I going to look at that as a goal and
Right.
just and check my own ego and say, wait, maybe tomorrow I'll lift 5 pounds more than I did today, and I'll get closer to that monster over there, if that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
Or I could touch my toes or whatever, or run for a half hour.
Yeah, whatever the goal happens to
whatever
be.
that goal is. Or my ego can get the better of me and like, oh my God, I'm worthless and I'm injured and that person is mean. He needs to be kicked out of Planet Fitness. He's a lunk. And I see this. They got the no lunk thing for people that make other people insecure. So does that encourage the insecure people to go there and to say, you can't be you here because you make me feel uncomfortable? Or do we have an environment where those big guys can lift big, but if they act out of line, that's the thing. They can exist however they want to exist, but if they're trying to intimidate on purpose, or their mere existence shouldn't intimidate somebody. It should be their actions that do it. But I see a movement in society and at the gym where that guy's mere presence bugs people, so they say you shouldn't be here.
Right.
On Twitter.
Yeah, the motivation thing, I guess, is a kind of a tricky one to figure out, right? Like, is this person just really amped up about their workout and that's why they're doing it? Or is it a form of flexing on somebody else?
Yeah. Yeah. And okay. So can a person exist who doesn't believe in abortion and just be allowed to exist who doesn't believe in abortion? Or even let's take it. I'm a Christian and I believe in Jesus and I don't believe in abortion. Can they be allowed to be themselves on contemporary social media without being attacked by atheist, pro-life, social justice freaks? you bitter mutants. No. No, can they just exist? Because I don't see that. And as a vegan, every once in a while I'll have some fucking meathead. He's like, oh, hey, bacon. Oh, fuck, I trumped that guy. Like, no, okay. But can that guy exist, like, let's say on Twitter, and have his opinions? Or is that considered hate speech and these crazy social justice people are allowed to attack him because their values are different?
Is that person just trying to exist, though, or are they trying to push their beliefs on other people?
Well, what if they are? Should they not have the equal opportunity to share their belief system with anybody as much as those that would advocate for social justice?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I'm not in favor of them getting banned, but I am in favor of them getting that kind of pushback to let them know that those opinions are not going to be tolerated in
Why
society.
not? Why Christianity or pro-life?
Yeah, when you start, because the end goal of that is to what? To push those beliefs onto the rest of society, which will eventually lead to laws being passed to what? To dictate that those beliefs be followed
Okay.
and obeyed in society.
Now, on the same token, let's say inclusive language, the gender narrative. Can somebody say, look, I don't agree with that because if given your free reign, you want to instill this in society and create legislation to push this on people that don't want to accept it, and your new narrative is going to be the legal standard.
Yeah, but I think those are kind of like what is that, like false equivalency?
I don't think so.
One is, in my mind,
When you agree
objectively
with?
better than the other one.
Oh, that's that. Yeah, but that Christian doesn't believe that.
No, they don't, but they're wrong.
Why are they wrong?
I mean, if you just look at it on face value, like, sure, two people can believe something, but if we just separate ourselves from the fact that it's two people, if you just wrote it down and said, okay, what is better objectively for society? I think something like bodily autonomy for women is clearly a good thing.
But bodily autonomy for those people that don't want vaccination is bad?
If they don't get vaccinated, then in return, that would harm society.
Maybe. I see equivalency. I don't see a disequivalency here. Have you? Okay, I'm going to be frank here because I don't have a dog in the fight. You know what I mean with the abortion deal. But I have seen late-term abortions on video. Mm-hmm. And I've seen the reconstruction of babies, not little tiny fetuses, late-term abortions where this was a child or a baby. And I don't think they anesthetized that fetus.
Right.
They just went in and tore it apart. And there's a reason I'm a vegan, because I don't believe something needs to suffer for my choices, my convenience. I try to limit the violence in my existence with the Buddhist principle of ahimsa. Now, when I saw that, I burst into tears. And I'm pro-choice. And I think there needs to be limits on what term this was allowed. Now, I used to think that specifically abortion was only up to 3 months, the first trimester. But then I found out it's legal in Canada the second trimester, right? So it's 24 months.
Well, technically here
or
we
24
don't have
weeks,
limits.
excuse me. Yeah.
In Canada, technically there are no limits.
Oh, yeah. Legally, you can go up to 9 months.
Yeah.
Now, that's ridiculous to me. And I think as a society, a moral society, we should have limits on what is tolerable. We have hate speech laws. We have, but that narrative, we're not allowed to have that conversation. Just like people don't want to see the slaughterhouses because
Right.
it'll allow them to eat meat without any conscience. They don't want to see what actually is going on with abortions because then it'll allow them to do whatever they want without conscience. And at the same time, bodily autonomy, cool. Fuck all you want and do whatever you want to as the consequences and throw consequences be damned. You got a right to be. Where do we draw a limit on liberty? Where do we say, okay, you're free to do whatever you want until, and I think that until line is where this cultural debate is happening. And some people say, well, I should be able to do this. And other people say, well, we think that that's the until line until 3 months into your pregnancy, and after that, deal with the consequences.
Yeah. To me, something that's a medical decision like that, I just kind of say that it should be left up to the medical professionals.
But what if the medical professionals start being shut up, like in the case of like gender reassignment, and they're saying, look, this isn't healthy for these young people, or this isn't the way it goes. Well, that's because you're a bigot and you need to be quiet.
I'm not sure.
Well, the medical professionals start saying, no, that's not healthy, but the social activist kind of crowd
Okay.
starts saying, well, they put pressure on the medical. The fact that critical theory is being put into the STEM, like science, technology, engineering, and math, like real sciences. They're like, well, we need to respect the intersections of power when it comes to math, because math is white supremacist. You people are fucking insane. Like, this is insane. The limit to tolerance comes into play.
Yeah.
When you start saying ridiculous things because you can play whatever word salad you want to justify it by redefining words and doing this, I think that's when we have problems with the culture. Well, I know there's a narrative that says everybody's obsessed with a culture war to distract from a class war. Nobody wants to talk about class war, but everybody wants to talk about culture war. But I think that's a problem when a person can't have a conservative view because they're wrong, right? According to what? According to what? Whatever the narrative is being pushed by the progressive left or by the increasingly far left?
I think that extreme left is very loud and vocal right now, but I do believe that it's a pretty it's definitely the minority.
Calvin Klein just put an ad out with a pregnant man. A pregnant man.
Uh-huh.
Now, that's not a loud minority anymore.
Yeah, but
that's
culture. That's a commercial, right?
Yeah, it's advertising. It's advertising. Increasingly, people that are identifying as neither gender, the they, thems, the non-binaries, are gaining traction in society when the scientific community says that they aren't as prevalent as the amount of voice that they're having. You know, you got 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 2,000, legitimately, scientifically, that are non-binary individuals. Then why is it that my daughter knows like 13 in her grade 9 community?
Yeah.
In one school.
I mean, that kind of stuff. Like, I know when we were younger, it was, what was it? I don't even think bi was a thing.
Oh, it was a thing. It was a thing. It was around. There was guys that gave guys boners. And
oh, when I was in high school, you were either gay or, I mean, that was basically
No,
it.
you were straight or in danger.
Yeah.
That was high school.
Right?
And my daughter's generation doesn't have a clue about a hate crime.
No, but they're figuring out this new thing, and I mean, I don't have any kids, so I am not as attached to it. So I don't know, to me it's kind of like I don't think it's that big of a deal. It's a loud deal, but I don't think it's a big deal.
I think it's a big deal when reality is being redefined for people's subjective wants. I want to identify as something. Therefore, reality needs to shift to accept my wants and my subjective experience. Neil deGrasse Tyson, he's the one who said, anecdotal evidence is the lowest form of scientific experimentation. If you say, I experienced this, therefore it's true, well, you need to line up some experiments, some repeatable results. You need to have the scientific method to back you up. And we got to be very careful not to twist science to fit our beliefs and to live in a rational, ordered society.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the difference that I would draw, though, is between objective and subjective reality. Mm-hmm. Something objective, like, is this table really here? Yes, we can't deny that.
Well, both of us can agree. We're sharing a common reality there.
Yeah. But something like the gender debate, that's not an objective reality.
That's a subjective truth.
Right. So in that sense, yes, people are trying to change the reality of that conversation to having a new conversation about like what exactly are gender, what are gender identities and expressions.
Right there, I think, is the crux of the conversation. What is gender? Gender is male, female. Identity is not gender. And there's a revision of the term gender to revise it to mean identity. And I think therein lies the problem, especially with most conversations you have about this, where one guy, gender's male and female. That's simple. It always has been. No, up in the lofty towers of the intellectual elite in these critical theories classes, they've redefined the term gender to mean identity. But identity is subjective, and gender is objective. You got male, female, and intersex. And the statistics are there on how many are born this. Your psychology doesn't come into play.
Male and female is sex, though, not gender.
once upon a time, and it wasn't that long ago, those were synonymous. Gender and sex were synonymous terms. Male and female, man and woman.
It
But
was
now,
synonymously used, but
because that's the meaning of the word. And then in critical theory, feminism, like gender studies, that term got revised and it got written into enough studies that the term gender became synonymous with identity.
yeah.
So
I
now-
would say that it got re-examined.
Re-examined?
Yeah, like the narrative or the agreed upon.
Is it agreed upon if we're debating it?
Well, it was for all of our lives, right? We just took it for granted that this was the way it was. And then all of a sudden people started questioning, is it actually that way? Does it have to be that way?
Is this table really here at all?
See, this,
You,
we can
your
see it, we can
experience of the
touch it,
table is
right?
different than mine. Is this blue or black? Is the light white or yellow?
But that's kind of the, again, like, you know, this is an objective reality. If you started arguing that this table doesn't exist, then, you know, one would have to start questioning.
Well, that the matter, that the molecular structure at the very root core of this table is the same molecular structure as me. It's all carbon based, and we're all one thing.
Yeah.
So then, like, if we want to play the semantic games, we can turn entire reality into a soup of intellectual like existence, and it's only ideas that separate you from me and this from that. Now,
You could, but I don't think we need to get that far.
exactly, like we don't need to do with gender. And we can
But
say,
we've always done kind of like, we say, I'm a man, but that guy, he's a real man. Like, okay, well, what does that mean? We've had these, you know, these things in our language before where we start saying that somebody's a real man.
social
or-
constructs surrounding gender are
Yeah.
not gender, though.
It's
So
part of the
okay.
same conversation,
Okay, so
which to me is enough to kind of support the fact that it's always been a social construct. We just always agreed on what that construct was as a society. And now
no,
we're-
gender isn't a social construct. I believe the expectations and standards surrounding gender were the social construct.
Oh, okay.
The idea of what manhood represents, what manhood, not what a man is, but what manhood represents, or femininity, masculinity, femininity, those are social constructs, 150%, 100%. Masculinity and femininity are fluid. Man and woman are not fluid. But that semantic game that's being played, where gender itself is a social construct, is a ridiculous revision of reality. And to say you can't question this without being a bigot, like, no, these are conversations that need to be had by
Yeah.
people interested in living in reality.
I agree with that. And I do agree. Again, I think I said it before, but I agree that they are trying to change the reality. But I still kind of stick to the reality that they're trying to change is a subjective one. Because I do think that the expression of gender and what gender is are the same thing. I do think that it
What's
is
your
the same
definition of
conversation.
woman by that rationale?
That's one where, to me, I kind of feel like my best answer would be that I
I'm
don't
not
know.
a biologist.
No, I'm not a sociologist.
You don't need to be, because a definition of woman is an adult human female. That's it.
I would
and
say
so
that
when
that's the
somebody
definition of a female.
No, you can't use female to define female. Woman is an adult human female. And to say something like, a trans woman is a real woman, you need to have the definition of what a real woman is. But then they get into this lofty, it's complicated. No, it's not. It's not.
Well, if we start playing the semantic game, what does adult mean?
Adult age. Well, in my opinion of adult would be age of, depending if you're talking about legal or biological adult, right? Biological adult to me would be the ability to biologically reproduce, but also have the intellectual and the emotional capacity to formulate the consequences of your actions.
How do you prove that?
Well, science has done it. Science has done it. Like, you've got a young woman can have her period at whatever age. By age 25, they start to really formulate the consequences of their action, which is something I kept in mind when I ran my stripper agency. Trust me, because most of the dancers were between 19 and 24, 25.
Right.
And at that age, they're like, you know what? Maybe I don't want my boobs all over the internet. Maybe not. Maybe not.
So they would not be women.
Well, maybe not necessarily. So, but legally, Like, I think the objective reality that law wants to say 18, the age of consent.
Yeah.
Or 16 is the age of consent, I guess, but the voting, the age of consent is 18. So it is a fluid thing. In some cultures, as soon as a young woman menstruates, there you go. In other cultures, as soon as the man can enter the hunting party, he's a man, or the young boy can. But we had these rites of passage to set that apart. And all of that's been done away with in our so-called civilized society. You know, you don't have to endure any passage point between childhood and adulthood.
Yeah.
In Africa, there was scarification that had to happen on the young woman's stomach. And if she couldn't endure that scarification, she definitely can't endure childbirth. So she is not a woman yet.
And it's
Right.
not part of the Western civilization, though, that we're getting rid of those barbaric practices.
Are they barbaric, or are they very important for our psyche? We end up, and I'm a firm believer in this, that we've created, with the removal of cultural rites of passage and traditions, we've created a perpetual emotional childhood where people don't want to own their own consequences of their actions. They want the collective to take care of the problems for them. They demand authority to solve their problems.
That coddling of the ego.
Yes. And that's just it. Or even worse, the narcissism of the ego, because it never got checked.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? The ego gets out of control. And I see this with identity politics a lot, where it's narcissism. I am the most important thing. You need to respect me. If you insult me, I am injured. And my identity is super important. More important than this whole room. This whole room needs to respect me. Because you haven't had to endure anything to check your ego and to say you're part of this entire room. This room is you and you're this room and we're all in one boat together. That idea of I'm the most important thing and you need to respect my stuff. Oh, okay. Do you need to respect me? No, I don't need to respect you. You respect me. It's a one-way street. And I think it's an incredible problem. And you know what the funny thing is? I don't see this when I walk out my door that often.
It's very online. Yeah.
One of my best friends is a non-binary lesbian. You know, straight up, she got her boobs cut off. We have great conversations. And I asked her, like, you know, you're not one of them, are you? She's like, fuck no, Pat. And I'm like, thank the fuck Christ, you know, because we're buddies and we have great conversations and she's far more butch than me. and she still goes by she. And she said that that's one of the frustrating things that she's dealing with right now is people trying to pigeonhole her. And she's like, well, you know, I've dealt with this my whole life.
Yeah.
I am who I am. I identify with my pussy. I'm a she. You know, can you just go with that, you know? But I don't know, man. Nobody has to accept my self-image. If I demand that, oh, well, you know, whatever, I'm a dominant male, and you should call me sir, you know. Nobody has to accept my adjectives, right? I'm handsome, charming, and witty. Whenever you describe me, you have to use my adjectives.
I do. I always do.
Attaboy, Jose. That's why we're friends. That's why we're friends. But that would be incredibly That would be incredibly narcissistic of me to accept everybody or to expect everybody to play my game. And I don't see how this is any different.
Yeah, I think somewhere along the line, definitely, like the shark got jumped, right?
The shark?
Yeah, jumping the shark.
I never heard that.
Oh, it's a term where you went from like normal to crazy. You jump to the shark.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure it came. What was that? Happy Days, the Fonz. You know, the guy with the leather jacket.
I remember the Fonz.
Yeah.
He was my archetype for toxic masculinity.
There was an episode where he goes surfing, and of course he's still wearing his leather jacket. And he, on his surfboard, he jumps over a shark, and so then it became like popular lingo, just because that was
I've
the
never
most
heard that.
Yeah, it was just
Yeah.
the most ridiculous scene that had appeared on a TV show up until that point. So people were like, "Oh, when you do something so ridiculous,
Absolutely ridiculous.
it's jumping the shark." So I think that there is an importance. There is something good about respecting people, being able to give them space to be their authentic selves. But like you said, somewhere along the line, that kind of became like you gave somebody that inch and they ran a mile with it.
I agree. I think that really sums up what I try to say when we have these conversations. It's like there's reasonable and then there's going unreasonable. You know what I mean? Like Okay, let's talk about the right for a second. So I think it's reasonable to say this is your country. These are your natural resources. These are your people, whether they're new to your country or not, but these are your people. You have a right to protect your values. You have a right to protect the safety, the social infrastructure of your country. And you have a right to say, look, if you're just here to fuck us over and to rob us or to take advantage of this great country we built,
Yep.
maybe you shouldn't be here unless you want to participate. Now, I think it's unreasonable to say if you're brown, you can't come in, and if you're white, like you can.
Yeah.
Like that's bullshit. And I think the ethnicity thing, you know, I remember we had gotten a little bit of a debate, a very short one time where it was like, you told me that some politician wanted to have a test for basic values to get into Canada. And
Yes.
I'm like, that's right on. I agree with that. And you're like, but that's bad, Pat. And I'm like, but is it? But is it? I guess it depends what values we're talking about.
Right. And we already do in Canada. We have a point system for people that want to immigrate here. And that comes with a test, and it comes with being able to, you have to be able to prove that you're either going to be, that you're going to be financially stable. So either you already have a job lined up or you have sponsors that are.
I think there's a myth in that right-wing narrative that anybody that comes to Canada is given a home and given money
Yes.
right off the bat.
Yeah, very much so.
And that is a myth?
Yeah, it is a myth. Yeah. I personally would describe myself as a nationalist, a patriot and
You
a
and Don
nationalist.
Cherry.
But I would differ from him in saying that I want the best for my country first, Canada first. And sometimes to get that means that you do have to have not what is it,
Eventually you
social
have to
programs,
say
but
no.
globally. Well, yeah, definitely say no. So I'm in support of our immigration system. I understand that being so means that some people are just not going to get in, and I feel bad about that. But we also do have a lot of programs that, like we said, money, aid, and support to other countries, especially third world countries, which a lot
And
of
Israel.
right-wingers.
It's important. They
That's
need
a-
our money.
That's a different topic.
See, we got lots to talk about.
We don't want to get canceled first episode out, though.
We're never going to get canceled. This is a private pirate radio. Nobody's going to fuck with us. We have no sponsors. It's us in my basement. But okay. But we talked about values.
Yes.
You said that there were some basic values that they go on when people come to Canada.
Yeah, I know for sure one of them is basically you have to take a little test that proves that you're not a misogynist or a homophobe.
Really? You do?
Yeah.
Because like grooming gangs are getting into Ontario, and
I mean, you can lie. It's a like it's a yeah. And so you for sure can. But when you have that was Maxim Bernier.
and they don't do that for people that are born in Canada.
Exactly.
You can
So
be
that's
as
my
rancid
problem
a
with
human
it.
being as you
If we're
want.
going to have these values and ethics tests, then I would be in favor of it if it was spread across the board, which it's not.
But that being said, there are some rights that come with being born on a land. Now, like, you can be a bit of a reprehensible Canadian, but if you're a reprehensible individual trying to become a Canadian, it's a different standard.
Yeah.
And I think that's not good. I stand against reprehensible Canadians as much as I do against immigration from reprehensible people. But to me,
But yes, once they're already here, then it's kind of society's job to reform them. But we don't need to bring in more and then have to have even more to reform.
So I had this debate before I quit Facebook with a guy. Actually, it was right when I signed on to Facebook.
Build a
And-
wall.
Build the wall. Well, okay, don't get me going. Okay, but okay. So the question arises: how we feel about people with a contrary value system establishing parallel societies in your country. Right?
Okay.
So this could be religious, it could be whatever, whatever it is, those parallel value systems where they buy up a lot of property, they get a community, that community becomes so insular that it's almost untouchable by, the outside society or even the police agencies. You see this happening in France where there's supposed no-go zones, like with the Muslim culture, and there's radicals that are being kept in this culture. But then there's the narrative that that's because they're racist. They're racist. And they're like, no, this is like a parallel value system where there's like our way or we kill you. You know, don't come here. We're going to stone you, you know, and that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's considered racist to question that.
And we already have that to a certain degree with, like, what is it, Mormons and Mennonites, right?
And the Hutterites.
Hutterites, yeah. All
But-
of those heights.
But those people don't have it written hardwired into their religion that it is the true religion written by the perfect man, the perfect book. Anybody who goes against it is an apostate that deserves to be killed. And if you are a heretic, you have the option to convert or perish. And so these guys like Al Qaeda or ISIS or, you know, Abu Sayyaf in the Philippines, they aren't radical versions of Islamists. These are proper Islamists. And anybody who isn't as fundamentalist as them is a reformer that technically gets freaked out when they roll around because they're practicing an apostate version of Islam.
Right. Yeah, like the orthodox versus unorthodox. I
Yeah,
guess.
there is no room for unorthodox according to the Quran, and yeah, it's a pretty hard line deal, and it's also pretty hard line when it comes to women's roles, children's roles, the role of gay people in a society. So, and that, don't get me wrong, I respect people that respect God and want to live a pious lifestyle, but I think that these are valid conversations to have.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. They are valid conversations to have, because if we're going to be having these people joining what we already have as a society, then we need to know who they are and what they believe.
And I'll stand against Canadians that have the same, you know, if you think pedophilia is okay and child abuse is okay and stoning homosexuals is okay and subjecting women to, you know, second-class status, and you're born Canadian, we're going to have the same issue. I don't care what color you are.
Right.
Like my tribe is decreed by my values, not ethnicity, not religion. If we believe the same things, then we're in the same boat, right? And I had this debate with a guy who's like just anti-Muslim. This is back when I got onto Facebook, you know, right when I got back on. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, it was a shithole of like bigotry and hatred and negativity. And I asked him, I'm like, okay. So you don't like the Muslims because of their homophobia and their violence and stoning and honor killing and, you know, clitorectomies and all of this stuff. What are you doing to fight sexism, homophobia, and child abuse in Canada aside from this? He's like, I fight it by standing against Islamic immigration. And I'm like, but Ben, there's reprehensible ideas from fucking Canadians all the time. What are you doing to fight them? Fighting the Islam, fighting Muslims. And I'm like, fuck, so you just don't, you're a bigot. That's just it. You don't care if a white guy has those opinions, you know, you just care when brown guys have those opinions. And that really bugged me. And at the same time, I ended up quitting Facebook because somebody called me a bigot because I asked about Fallon Fox, the MMA fighter.
Yeah, I'm so glad that I left Facebook a long time ago.
It's such a shithole.
Yeah, it's just not conducive to good mental health, I don't think.
It's also a safe space for gaslit zombies. Yeah. You ask everybody, and Russia's the evilest empire, and you know, my last podcast, you know, the Pitboss review number 2, I just about deleted because I went off about propaganda, and I basically put forward Russia's, you know, standpoint on why they are going into Ukraine, or at least the part that I understood at the time. Any information that you get from one people that says don't listen to the other people because all they have to say is lies,
Right.
is probably lies.
Yeah.
That's propaganda in itself, right? Now, anybody who said, hey, this is their opinion, this is our opinion, we're going with our opinion, but this is why they feel this, that's a balanced viewpoint. But I don't see people coming with a balanced viewpoint with this war or anything else.
No, it's actually been really crazy to watch it unfold in real time, where you're seeing propaganda from both sides be consumed and propagated into popular culture. Yeah, it's actually pretty wild. And then, of course, there's that need to have a hot take, right? Everybody needs to have an opinion. As soon as the war started, you start seeing all of these people with opinions about it. And my opinion was, I don't know enough to have an opinion yet.
Yeah. I wanted to get information, so I listened to both sides, right?
Yeah.
And all I was hearing from the West was Russia's invading this innocent country for no reason. They're evil invaders.
Yep.
And I'm like, nobody does this shit for no reason. So I kind of went out of my way and I went through some sideways channels to kind of hear their side of the story. And I don't necessarily agree with like invading, but they have a reason, you know?
Yeah.
But that's not, you're not supposed to listen to that. You're not supposed to pay attention to it because that's disinformation. And it fucking, I'm like, and watching everybody fly these flags for a country on the other side of the planet because they're buying it, the Kool-Aid, they're drinking the Kool-Aid all the way down. And I'm like, fuck, man.
Well, it's kind of the Red Scare all over again, right? Mm-hmm. And even if you do get to like listen to their side of the story, it wouldn't matter anyways because they're evil and wrong. So even if you did get the right information,
that makes you evil and wrong.
If you agree with it, yes.
Yes, if you consider the politically incorrect narrative, you're the enemy. You're the bigot. You're the imperialist, right? I remember, and you know what's funny? I really took a more active approach in commentary on what was going on in current events instead of the big picture when the Canadian government rebranded the mandate protests, the trucker mandate protests, as white supremacist protests. And I'm like, you fucking whack jobs. What a propaganda tool. You know, if you don't want to talk about what these guys are actually talking about, but it's much easier to combat if you say they're misogynist, racist, white supremacists. Well, fuck, nobody wants to be on sides of those guys.
Right.
Well, fuck that. I'm not a white supremacist. I'm not going to support it. And if you do support it, that means you are supporting white supremacy. And I'm like, okay, that's fucked. You know, this is like a straw man. It's like misrepresenting what they're actually about by saying they're bigots. And my daughter came home from school and her teacher had told her that if you got a table of 9 people and, you know, one Nazi sits down and they don't kick him out, you got a table of 10 Nazis. And this is what they're teaching in grade 9. So I bugged out. I called the school board. I complained, whatever. Then the Ukrainian war started and it became very apparent there's Nazi regimes or Nazi battalions as part of the Ukraine. What about that 1 in 9?
Yeah.
Like there's a Nazi. Get him. Oh, wait, I'm Ukrainian. Hugs. You're one of the good ones.
I actually got into a lot of trouble on Twitter because of that very same thing where I said, you know, they're making it really tough to support them. And that was exactly the reaction. I was like, well, they not only do they have parts of their regime that are, but they have a party that has, I think last election they won something like 5 or 6% of the vote, and
which is significant.
It's a decent number, and they won. Yeah, like
that's not a radical fringe number. Well, no, maybe it's a kind of like
but enough that you know they have whatever, at least one seat in the House. You know what I mean? 1 or 2, whatever it amounts to. So they're getting
and they're overt
some
Nazis.
representation. Oh yeah. And so I mean, it's not just representative in the military. I mean, I think every military in the world has, you know, factions in it that are hardcore extremists of some kind.
That being said, the last time I did a vote here on our ballot, there was a member of the Communist Party running and a Christian Heritage, you know, party. Which,
So, like we have them here too. They just don't get as much of the
nobody
support.
takes them seriously.
Yeah. But you know, like this, when I saw that, I was like, that's something to be concerned about. Like, no, you're buying into the Russian propaganda.
The Russian propaganda.
I was like, I'm not. This is, you can go online and
do you
look
know
at
what the Sonnenrad is? Do you know what the Wolf's Angle symbols are?
Just look on the, Ukrainian government's website. It'll show you right there that this party got this many votes and this many representatives. And then you look at that party's platform and you're like, oh, that's not good.
I've got a friend and he's in the Canadian military and he's actually an instructor and he travels around the world to train people. And he said straight up when they went and they worked with the Ukrainian guys, there was like a concerted effort to make sure that they were like, we will not train the Nazis. We will not work with the Nazis. We've already got bad publicity from training Nazis accidentally. This time around, we cannot train Nazis. And then right there, like, it's proved. It's proof. Like, the logo, the Sonnenrad, was taken from the SS, like the castle that Himmler built. That's where that logo came from. Like, there's tons of sun wheels from all kinds of European history. Don't get me wrong. It's an ancient shamanic symbol. But that specific one you see on all the Ukrainian uniforms is straight up a Nazi logo.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, you could, argue the same thing about the swastika, right? It's like, yes, did it used to have a different meaning and does it still in some circles? Sure.
In my circles.
But more often than not, that is how that duck quacks.
No, I won't quite die on that hill defending the swastika, but I'm definitely going to fight on it. yeah, the Nazis were fucking goofballs, and they ruined a lot of things. The more I learn about that Hitler guy, the less I like him. He's not cool.
I mean,
But-
they co-opted a lot of things, right? Even the Iron Eagle used to be Roman, right?
Oh yeah, the Roman salute. The term Aryan is like an Indo-European term of like the people that the Indian culture has been talking about coming down from the Georgia area, Russia, Iranian through Iran. That was the Aryan people. The Brahmins believed they descended from the Aryan people, and the Germans believed. Well, they also came north, and they were originally from Atlantis or whatever, fuck. And so we're Aryan too, blonde hair, blue eyed, and like, come on, I fucking ridiculousness. And that's why they stole the swastika, because it's also an ancient Hindu belief or a Hindu Buddhist kind of symbol of good fortune and natural order and like cycles. Like it's a sun wheel. There's one direction and an evolution direction and a de-evolution direction, and and. You know, if you want to get woo, it's a powerful symbol.
Yeah, because they were really into mysticism, weren't they?
Yeah, it's a powerful symbol, and you can use it as a psychological charging energy kind of thing. And the more people see it, the more powerful it gets. Like this is the woo kind of belief system, kind of like the Golden Arches or anything else, right? You know what that means when you see that. Logos, psychology, propaganda. They were masters of propaganda. That was kind of their bag. And but when you go back and you study the roots of the swastika in the Dharmic religions, it's a phenomenally important symbol. And there's another side of me that really wonders about anybody who would try to demonize all these pre-colonial symbols. Whether or not it's accurate or not, but to say, we don't look at that symbol, we don't look any further, it's a symbol of hate, that's where it ends. Don't look at the history of it. Don't look at the roots of it. Don't look at where it comes from or what it's actually supposed to mean before these fucking goofballs ruined it. Where's the benefit in erasing that culture? Right? Don't look at that. That's, I see this so much. One of my tattoo clients came in and he told me, he was from Ireland, and he said that one of the biggest things that he noticed when he got to North America was our media and how we didn't get news sources from anybody outside North America. We're very insular. And when you think about it, with the Abrahamic viewpoint on philosophy, on religion, on esoteric or mystical or I guess core archetypal belief systems, we don't get anything outside of the Abrahamic model.
Right.
Our idea of God is very God, white man on the throne, cracking the whip, telling you right and wrong. Right? It's an emperor model. It's a priest model. Mayor, like a mayoral model, landowner model, emperor on the throne model. And that is very much an insular viewpoint. So when somebody says, I'm an atheist and I don't believe in God, they haven't really followed the roots of, world religion and what they believe that could represent. It's only this like dude on a throne, or Allah, or Jehovah, or Yahweh, or whatever that version is.
Yeah, they're very much specifically saying, I don't believe in this representation of God, because you haven't even learned what that could be. Any
other world cultures.
Yeah.
Like, you want to talk about privilege, you think that God only represents your God, or this Christian God? Like, come on, guys, I used to have some debates on the internet with atheists about this too. I'm like, the concept of God is much larger than what you're like. The fact that scientists, like guys like Albert Einstein say the universe is so grand and awe-inspiring, it kind of leans towards a great creation beyond our comprehension.
Yeah.
And that's like the height of science, right? They're like, we stand in the edge of the unknown, looking out at the unknown with awe and wonder.
I think that was difference between being agnostic and agnostic with an I.
Oh, I've never heard of agnostic.
Agnostic basically means that before we can have a conversation of whether God exists or not, we have to have a conversation about what God is. Like, what do you mean by God? What do I mean by God? Then once we figure that out, then we can have a conversation about whether it exists or not.
Liberal rules of discussion they also decree on how to have a proper debate. And a proper debate any debate, because I was on a debate club in school, imagine, you have to establish your definitions at the beginning of the conversation.
Yes.
So to make sure we're talking about the same thing, we need to know we're talking about the same thing. By this, I mean this. By this, I mean this. And it's the same thing when you go into the court of law. They establish what the legal definitions of these things are. So when we talk about God, we need to know exactly what you think that means and what I think that means. And when we talk about gender, we should probably be talking about the same thing instead of I'm talking about biology and you're talking about identity.
Right.
Right. But those conversations aren't happening. And what ends up happening, at least in the gender conversation, as far as I'm familiar, is we get in a debate about the definition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which maybe that does need to happen. Like we said, before we can have the conversation. But, this reminds me of, I did listen to the whole thing. Do you know who Sam Harris is?
Mm-hmm. I love Sam Harris.
Yeah, big fan. He had Jordan Peterson on. Well, he's had him on a few times, but the very first time that he had him on,
they get in some deep and existential debates about things.
They debated for an hour and a half. I listened to the entire hour and a half where they debated on the definition of true. The word true. What is truth?
Well,
and Sam was trying to get him just to say, okay, let's just agree that, what I don't even remember. This was like 8 years ago or something. Let's just agree that this is the definition of truth, and then we can move on.
Can we run with that definition?
Yeah, and we can. And Peterson was just like,
of course not.
No, we can't agree on that because blah blah blah. And what and this, and then you have to look at it this way, and it went on for, I swear to God, it was 90 the whole, and then finally Sam Harris just got frustrated and he was like, you know what, we've been going around in circles for 90 minutes here. We just need to wrap this up. We need to, and they just, that's where it ended.
I've seen other podcasts with the two of them where they joke about that first one.
Oh, okay.
And they're like, remember when we did that for like an hour and a half talking about the definition of truth? But that's valid, because if you're not talking about the same thing, can you come to a conclusion? See, that with the liberal conversation, or the idea of a good faith conversation, are you not looking for truth as opposed to prove that you are right?
Yes.
And if two people are talking about different things, both can be right.
Yeah. And that's, I think, one, the good faith, right? Am I trying to just prove to you that I'm right? Or sometimes it's not even prove to the other person. It's to prove to whoever the audience is, or even to yourself.
That's on social media. It's proving to an audience. When it's two individuals, they're talking to each other.
Yeah.
And, well, here, we're doing this for an audience, but whatever. You hear that, folks? You hear that? This is just me and Jose talking and convincing each other. No. Like, if it's two people having a conversation, it's probably trying to find common ground so we can get along and we can go from here on in with that common understanding. But yeah, a lot of times it's a spectacle for the peanut gallery where each side has people they're trying to impress that are like cheering from the back seats, like, "Raw, yeah, you're doing the work for our cause," and the other person's like, "Fuck, these people are ridiculous." Yeah. It's funny because a guy like Joe Rogan, for example, which is funny because I don't watch his podcast. I see clips now and then, and he seems like a really rational guy. Like, he has opinions, which I think largely are based with, like, an informed opinion. I don't think they're coming from pure ignorance, right? And he seems to have a fairly balanced outlook, as opposed to, I guess, a guy like Ben Shapiro, right? Who's obviously just, like, almost like a right-wing little troll. Like, let's make fun of people. And so a guy like Joe Rogan, or even Jordan Peterson, I think Jordan Peterson's insanely intelligent, has a huge amount of merit, but a lot of people hate him straight up because of maybe 1% of his body of work disagreed with something that they think is very fundamental truth, right? Like whether his contention against the modern feminism or the non-binary identity or, free speech laws in Canada. Well, he's got a body of work that he's got like 13, 14 hours of lectures where he does the psychological significance of biblical stories.
Oh, yeah.
Like, are you going to discredit all of that because you don't like his stance on feminism?
What's the right word? Prolific? No. Where somebody has like a large amount of output. Like he's been, working on this stuff for 30 years?
Huge.
There's I would say that he's definitely conservative in his viewpoints. Rogan is probably more centrist. And then for a really good follow, that would be more of a lefty. There's a guy named David Pacman. Yeah, David Pacman. I would suggest if anybody wants to check his stuff out. Yeah, he's got a good, same kind of thing, like very analytical, really level-headed, doesn't get into, like shouting matches with anybody, and really kind of, he does the extending the charity thing and being like, okay, so yeah, you're saying this, and
I have to check him out.
Yeah, he's really good. Does the whole like, okay, so when you said that, like, is this what you meant, or did you, let's clarify this first, and then I'll, throw my 2 cents in or whatever. And yeah, I like his stuff.
See, yeah, that's just it. It's easy to find the right-wing pundits, but you can find the left-wing people because it's everywhere. You just go on Twitter and you're going to see some writer, some author, some actress, some whatever, with all of their opinions, about how everybody's the same, nobody's any different, there's no hierarchy, it's the worst thing ever, and if you say otherwise, you're the worst person ever. And I see that on Facebook, I see it on Twitter, I see it less on Instagram because you can kind of choreograph your worldview to common echo chamber. You can really build a successful echo chamber on Instagram. But yeah, it's a tough one. I guess Young Turks, like there's all these different media outlets, and you're cheered if you say the right things, and you're deplatformed and you're booed and you're beaten back if you say the wrong things. And it's kind of ridiculous.
It's totally ridiculous and unproductive. To me, I don't understand what their goal is. It almost seems like it's just, I don't even know, what are they after, fame or money?
I think a large amount is like sponsorship, finances. Give me some cash, give me distribution.
Yeah, because there's a lot of these people online that are kind of really big in their sector, right? I think the Young Turks were really big on YouTube. There's a Twitch guy, a streamer that gets a ton of revenue from that stuff. What's his name? Destiny. And he's one of these like lefty guys. He gets into debates with people, has people call in the show. And I would say that he's basically like a Ben Shapiro, like a left-wing Ben Shapiro.
Oh, so he's condescending and
super condescending, goes for the dunks, usually has guests on that are kind of out of their element. They've clearly not done whatever research or whatever homework they needed to do. Yeah. And so, yeah, he's going to get them on
the whole time.
Actually, the more I think about it, the more he is like a Ben Shapiro, because it's the whole watch Destiny destroy this, right wing.
See, that's the thing. I don't think Jordan Peterson is big on that. Like, I don't think if you watch his own videos, he's like, I destroy feminism. But other people will post that shit. Other people, yeah. And then they're like, oh, so that's what he's about. And the problem I see with Jordan, as much as I love most of his stuff, is he doesn't disavow the right-wing radicals. He can tear apart the problems with Marxism. He can tear apart communism, but he won't do the same thing about the far right. And because if he does that with the far right, he's going to lose his viewership. He's going to lose his readership. He won't sell as many books. He won't get as many subscribers to his, Patreon or whatever the hell he's running.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem. You've got the right and left brain people. You got the analytical people and the emotional people. And it's almost like, this might be a little woo again. If you can imagine, it's a pretty accurate analogy though, that with all of us with our phones becomes a link in a neural network of the globe becoming self-aware, or of humans on the globe becoming self-aware.
Okay.
And we see a division happening between the right brain, analytical, logical, science-minded people, and the left brain, analytical, science-minded people, and the right brain, creative, emotional, artistic people, poets and stuff like that, visionaries. So you have the brass tacks, rational people, usually right wing, and the visionary, artistic, left wing, starting to separate and debate between themselves, almost like the earth is becoming self-aware and arguing with itself on what direction that it needs to go in, right? And with every single phone connected to a greater wide web, it is almost like all of these little things are starting to light up. These neural networks are starting to connect and interact and have a self-aware conversation.
And kind of like the earth having an identity crisis.
Yes, becoming self-aware and establishing what are the moral values that we're going to have as a globe. And I think that that might be a valid thing. And you know what? The move towards global government and the move towards, well, individualism or collectivism, right? Are individual nations valid with our borders and our value systems that are standalone value systems that might be different than our neighbors, but we agree to disagree and we can trade and that's that? Or do we erase all borders and pretend we're all the same and there's no more hierarchy and we create the great global soup? You know, you will have nothing and be happy, or you will own nothing and be happy. Like, what direction do we go in? And I think that that's right. We're in a very interesting time where we're seeing this happening in real time. And I really think that that harsh debate that's going on is a consequence of people being connected through anonymous networks as opposed to
It removes the consequences of your, because you can just say whatever you want and there is no, like, is it like you don't even have to see the expression on the other person's face. Like, you can say some awful shit online and you don't have to deal with the pain or the discomfort that you cause the other person, because you don't even have to see their reaction.
As an old school street guy and who's kind of a conservative, well, and my values were formed by the street life. If somebody were to come up to me, let's say I was Elon Musk and I bought Twitter, and you don't like that I bought Twitter for whatever reason, because I'm going to give a voice to people you disagree with, or I might limit the people that you like, and you start posting, I hope you die, I hope someone murders you, kill yourself.
Yeah.
Now, if you take Twitter away and these people are sitting in the same room, and something like, I hope you fucking die and I hope you kill yourself, there used to be consequences to that.
Yep.
Where, oh, really? Smack, right? Okay, that's what you get. If you want to threaten me and say these things, you've crossed a certain line that we all agreed to. Whether you knew it or not, we all agreed by being here. And those are the consequences of that, those words. But there aren't consequences.
No, I actually had with the whole Will Smith slapping Chris Rock thing, where I'm like, sure, violence towards comedy should not be the most common reaction. But another part of me also says, if somebody says something hurtful or offensive to your wife, as a man, you get to slap them.
Really? No,
that's
that's pretty toxic masculinity.
It is, but
that's where I'm at. Fuck it.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think that is a rule that we used to have. That
well, okay. So in that one of the books I've read, Victimhood Culture, he talked about 3 different eras of time, and they largely depend on how much rule of law a society has. So in those societies without rule of law, they are usually honor-based societies, where if you challenge or injure my face, my reputation, my honor, I have a right and obligation to defend that physically, right? And you see this in any community with, you know, maybe old values, hunter values, warrior values, but also in any community with a very little rule of law, because otherwise chaos reigns, right?
Right.
So if you challenge me or my family or my honor, I have a right to slap you back.
Yeah.
So this will happen in jail, in gang communities, and in urban communities where the cops aren't there.
Right. In communities where the people themselves are setting the rules to the engagement. So you're policing yourselves, essentially.
Yeah, so that's an honor-based society. And as cultures become more civilized, they move towards what they call a dignity-based society, where if I feel offended, we talk it out. And if we can't talk it out, because it's not an automatic physical interaction, and if we can't talk it out, we might appeal to a mediator to come in and help us negotiate. And that's a dignity-based. And that's a moderate rule of law. It's not an overarching rule of law. But what they're seeing is they call it a victimhood culture. I don't call it that. I call it maybe an injury-based culture, where there's an overabundance of authority and people no longer can even tolerate dignified conversation. They immediately appeal to an authority figure to delegate the responsibility. So that's emotional childhood, where it's like, I can't handle my problems anymore. I need a grown-up to come save me.
Teacher,
guidance counselor, human resource, boss, whatever. People don't talk anymore. They're like, oh, you need to do something for me. And I advocate, Well, I came from an honor-based culture. I think
Yeah.
you and I growing up in like the 90s and 80s, like, yeah, that was kind of, maybe it's just our environment on the west side Saskatoon. I don't know. But like, if there's a problem, we're going to solve it. And you don't talk to cops.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then as I grew up and I had a family, I'm like, okay, I realize I live in a civilization. So there's a time when I can't handle it. It's probably better for everybody to call the police because I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to injure somebody. I don't want, I don't want to be injured. That's the other option. I don't want to get in trouble. So let's find a moderator. But I have a real hard time with these people that can't have a conversation anymore. And they will gossip about you instead of having a conversation with you. And you see this with the movement towards the left, where there's the Me Too movement where you out somebody without due process, or the victims' voices stuff, or the cancel culture. This person called me a bad name and we need to all punish him. And the person's like, but you haven't heard my side. It doesn't matter, right? So that is more of an injury-based culture, where as soon as you're injured, you appeal to your team or a larger community to handle the problem instead of being an adult enough to handle it on your own. And I advocate towards a move back towards dignity culture. And anybody who's too much of a tough guy that can't handle being offended, I think needs to also move towards a dignity culture. Like, let's talk about things. You don't need to throw a bottle at somebody, right? Yeah. But that was a very interesting thing. And it stuck with me ever since I first read it. I'm like, that's valid.
Yeah.
I don't think you need to call it a victimhood culture, but I think it's a valid reflection for sure.
Yeah. No, that definitely makes sense. To piggyback off of that, though, I do think that there is I don't think what most people call victimhood culture is what I would, but I do think that there is a victimhood culture out there, which is very much just like specifically online, where you see kind of the same as this need to have a hot take. You know, the same thing as when something comes out, and like, I don't know what you would call it, a reactionary culture maybe. And then the other one where you're looking for things to be offended by so that you can say, you know, I was attacked today. I was victimized today. This happened. So now give me attention, I guess. Kind of in the same realm as like, you know, having the hot take thing. It's this thing happened. Well, here's what I think about it. Give me attention.
Well, there was the Yale University. There was the problem where somebody wanted censorship to happen as far as Yale's Halloween costumes.
Okay.
They said, you know, we don't want any offensive, culturally appropriative, or potentially offensive costumes to be worn. And one of the professors put out a thing saying, well, once upon a time when you got to college, you're a grown-up and you can handle being offended and you don't need adults to do your dirty work for you. Like, this is an area where you should be challenged and you should challenge others and you should learn to handle challenges. And the student body went nuts. They bugged out. They demanded that she be fired, that she's a bigot, that she's like doesn't provide a safe space for marginalized and self-identified victimized students in Yale. These people are already privileged. They're in fucking Yale, right? So her husband comes out. I forget his name. It's like it's a Greek name. I think his name's Chris something. You can look it up, but again, you're going to find it on YouTube. Is like teacher destroys SJW students or something like that, but whatever. This guy is incredibly rational and he's trying to be as considerate as possible to manage a crowd of screaming students. And
I've seen the highlights.
Yeah, and this one woman is like, you don't even know my name. You don't respect me as a human being. And he's like, I teach 400 students. I'm sorry I don't remember your name. I'll do my best to remember it. And he checks her name again. And you need to quit because you refuse to apply. Like, these people are so injured and so broken by just not getting their way. And like, they can't say how this is actually injurious to them. Right. Aside from, you know, the systemic abuse of power and colonialism and all that other stuff. Right. Yeah, well, you're welcome. You're welcome for this school. You're welcome for higher education. You're welcome for your cell phone and your phone or your tires on your car, internal combustion engine, heated water. You're welcome for all of that. But, you know, now that it's oppressive, it's convenient. Right. Don't get me going. But these people scream this guy down and he can't get a word in edgewise. And it's a perfect example of the corrosion of a diplomatic dignity-based conversation. And especially because they just start screaming at him. They screaming over him and like, you need to quit. You need to quit. They both resigned. Him and his wife resigned.
Oh, wow.
And they were pushed out of school. So a lot of this stuff is coming not only on social media and these people that need to have a platform to be heard, but it's also happening in academia.
Mm.
And the problem with academia is when teachers stop having the guts or the ability to stand up to this, that becomes the narrative that is higher education. That gets pushed into the studies, that becomes science, that gets pushed into the studies, the social literature, right? And that's where I think there's a problem. These people need to be able to take a hit.
Yeah, I think I would argue that I think you do need to, not even a safe space, but a university should be a place of learning. And so it should be structured and conducive to learning, which doesn't always mean that you need to have a, that confrontational approach to it. You don't need to have a space where, because it's not even challenged. Like sometimes it is, what's the right word? Offensive?
Is it though?
Sometimes.
So
yeah, just my point is that you can structure it in a way that it's conducive to learning without it being just a free for all for, kind of like any opinions being valid.
I agree. Well, I don't think all opinions are valid, but I think opinions need to be heard. It's to the point, and I forget the specific school. There's a legal school in the U.S. that had to take rape law out of their legal course because the students didn't want to use the word rape to discuss it.
Yeah, I can't remember I read that too. I kind of just skimmed over the headline though, because I was like, I don't
have enough
right
energy to handle this. But that's insane. This is like reality. And you if you are so triggered by these things that you cannot hear them, you need therapy and not a higher education. Mm-hmm. And in the fetish community when I was there, not that this is a new podcast, you aren't familiar with my fetish history, but if you go to a dungeon and you can't witness the things happening in the dungeon, don't be there.
Right.
You need therapy. You don't need this, right? And if you need that much therapy, do that first before coming here and saying, I need to be saved from triggers.
I think this is another one of those occasions of when the left kind of started losing touch with the people, when you start getting into these spaces in academia where, again, it just becomes like theoretical and theatrical. So it almost makes you want or expect that that's how you're supposed to react. You get into like,
when you see somebody next to you doing it, that means I'm allowed to do it.
Yeah, and it goes beyond even debate culture of universities, where you get into that, like yelling at somebody about the, like that, you don't know my name, you don't respect me, you don't, and it's like, you would never do that in a normal conversation with somebody, but it's almost like it's expected and allowed because now you are on campus.
That's the culture.
Yeah.
Well, and in my mind, and probably in these teachers' minds, if some white student put on an afro wig and blackface and a spear and like a loincloth, they would be checked because that's just fucking insensitive as shit, But they're not going to legislate that you can't wear offensive things.
Right.
Like I think that the spirit of what's supposed to happen is being missed for the letter of what is supposed to happen. Like they wanted the legislation that says you cannot wear offensive things. Who decides what's offensive? Who decides what's injurious? The most easily injured among us? Right? Like the most fragile people get to say what's dangerous? Right? Like, does the Chihuahua get to say what happens in the dog park? Or do you just say, you're a Chihuahua, maybe you should go to a different dog park?
Or with stuff like that, it shouldn't be a legislative thing. It should be because it's what would you call it? If you are doing that offensive thing, if it was to be a crime, for lack of a better word, it would be a crime against society, right? Against the group, the community. So then that community should be the ones to dictate whether they want that allowed or not. So you don't make it a law that you can't do this. You just say, hey, dude, you're being a fucking asshole.
Yes.
Don't wear that in here. We don't want you in here.
Dignity culture.
Right.
Right. and
or even not even a dignity, just being adults.
Yes.
That's what I would say.
I would consider that.
Yeah.
I would consider that adult behavior. You're no longer a juvenile.
Yeah. You don't need the teacher to come save you. We just say, we don't want you in our space.
And And I've been saying that for a while, at least in Canada, that we do have hate laws, hate speech laws, and they are in place. And they say this is legal and this is illegal. And if you're on Twitter or anything else and you do something that's illegal, you encourage violence against an identifiable group, that's a hate crime. It's in the law books, you know, and if you don't like it, change the laws. But don't say, well, this offends me, therefore it is hate speech. I saw these things once Musk bought Twitter. All of a sudden, it's like, I'm just waiting for all of the hate language to roll in. And I'm like, you really think that that's going to happen? Because I think the legitimate hate language is going to get censored. What you consider hate language is just offensive to you.
Yeah.
Right? That's not necessarily hate language just because you hate it. Yeah. So...
Yeah, no, I think what do we have in Canada? It's freedom of expression, right? And
yes.
To me, it's a better law because it comes with more freedoms, but it also comes with more responsibilities. And so, like, you as a person need to be aware of what that means, and I guess like police yourself, limit yourself, know what you can get away with, what you can't, and what you should,
or have conversations in good faith.
Yeah,
you know, I think that's what this circles back to is like. You can have whatever beliefs you want, but ideally they're based in positivity and growth and peace and harmony and the best wishes for everybody involved. And if they aren't, you're just a bigot. And I think that's just it. If you're preoccupied with hating somebody, and it doesn't matter if you're on the right or left side of the spectrum, but you're preoccupied in hating the other person and you don't care about hearing what they're actually trying to say, you're just a fucking bigot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I recently just saw... a Buddhist guy was talking about what you should want out of your life. And I'm going to summarize it not very well, but basically he was saying that what you should want out of your life isn't success or money or riches or to be the best athlete or to be the best whatever, but to have a peaceful life. So one where you diminish your suffering and, if possible, to go one step further and diminish the suffering of the people and the people around you. So then you would try and aim to, kind of structure the society that you live in so that fewer people suffer less.
Well, yeah, and that's like a big thing in the Buddhism is doing your self-work first. You know, the more you improve yourself, the more you will improve your environment, and the more your environment improves, it resonates, right?
Yeah. I can't remember who said it, but one of my biggest personal philosophies is think globally, but act locally. So, and I kind of try and extend that for myself whenever I see any of these things pop off online, where you would think to yourself, okay, this is happening somewhere out in the world right now. I think it's awful. Like, let's say if there was a child labor news story that popped off. And so you look at that and you say, okay, I think this is abhorrent. I don't think that, children should be slaves or working in pit mines or whatever, but how much can I really do to affect change in that country over there? Probably not much.
But you could probably do something on 20th Street to stop child prostitution.
Exactly. So then, you're thinking globally, but this global thing, how does it affect you locally? So then, you could go right to the source there or bring it in a little bit more and say, is any of this exploitation happening within my own family, within my own circle of friends? Yeah.
How much of that exploitation is in your heart?
And then take it even as, so you just keep bringing it more locally and more locally.
That's that Gandhi quote, be the change that you want to see.
Yeah, that's a great one too.
Yeah, I like that one. All right, we're coming up on an hour and a half. That flew by, huh? Yeah, we should do this again. I think I'd like to see you more often. Yes. Good?
I agree. Absolutely.
All right. This has been Pitboss Review number 3. What is the date today here?
May 16th.
Okay. 2022, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's the year. All right. Hopefully, subscribe, listen, reach out, ask questions, and hopefully we'll get Jose back. Okay.
Awesome.
Have a good one. Thank you.